Greetings everybody, it's been over a month now and this is going to be actually a pretty short video, I'm fairly certain. Um, I've had in my mind to do reviews of South Park, the television series, for quite a while. It's quite an interesting and unique television series, very funny, uh, very biting critiques of society, and as it happens, the two creators, Matt and Trey, are both libertarians, and although they're not um, what's the word, very theoretical libertarians in the sense that they're not, quoting or alluding to explicit libertarian material. Libertarian themes are quite commonly um, exposed and dealt with in the show, and sometimes exceedingly well, and sometimes on issues that are not really popular libertarian issues. For instance, they have some great episodes dealing with the freedom of association. They have one, I think it's one of the earlier episodes, for instance, about a gay Boy Scout leader who is ostracized by the Boy Scouts because he's gay. And then there's this hue and cry against the bigotry that this involves, and the city basically city or the government, somebody forces the Boy Scouts to accept him, and then the gay person becomes upset and says he didn't want this. He didn't want them to be forced. He wanted them to love him for who he was and not be coerced into basically associating with him. That is an extremely unusual um, stance to take in popular culture. It is basically a strict adherence to the freedom of association, and by correlation the freedom of disassociation that very few people have, let alone would be willing to explicitly put into a major media presentation. Yet that's something that they've done. They've done many similar type issues, but I think the series is too long and too broad, and the video would be too rambling to really kind of cover all of it, or even attempt to cover all of it. I would never be able to remember all the issues. South Park is a show that I've never really watched as it aired. There's only probably been less than half a dozen episodes that I've seen, either the first day that they aired or within the first season that they aired. Um, I didn't start watching it probably until somewhere around the 10th season. Just friends of mine were big fans, and I would watch them. I saw the movie originally. I was still in high school when it came out, and it was kind of a big to-do because it was supposedly so graphic and so vile that I had to sneak in and lie about my age to get in, just to see it. Movie theaters want you to buy a ticket. They're not really policing too much who's going in. And it was about a year and a half, maybe 2 years ago, I decided to, since I had only seen a spattering of episodes, the ones that I might have caught, say, at a friend who was watching it. Even though Matt and Trey believe on their website you can stream and watch all their videos, I went ahead and started buying all the seasons on DVD. The earlier seasons, when you buy them used on Amazon, they're typically going to cost $2 or $3. As they become newer, they rise in price, but I think even the newest ones are going to cost, like a brand new season 18, I think is the last one that came out, be something like 15, 16, maybe $20 or less. Most of them are going to be quite a bit less than that. So, and I decided the only real way to kind of view them would be to systematically watch them all, which I didn't do all in one sitting. It's taken months and months and months. Maybe if I was busy, if I was preparing dinner, a lot of times at work, when I'm eating supper, that sort of thing, I'll watch an episode or two. And I had seen maybe half of them previously, and the other half I hadn't. And there's one that I wanted to talk about in this episode because I think it outlines something that so many people seem to miss. It was fascinating that sometimes they can take a concept that very few people can really grasp or seem to be able to grasp, or maybe they could, but they don't. And they explain it very, very well without preaching or without making it sound like they're trying to give a lecture, which I don't think they're trying to do, actually. I think they're making entertaining comedic videos that usually have a message. South Park is actually a show that has a message, and the message is usually not to preach libertarian principles, but to preach moral principles. However, those moral principles very often, perhaps even exclusively, are informed by a consistent libertarian ethic. I might be wrong about that, but that's certainly my sense of it, having now watched, I think, every episode, except for perhaps some of the ones that have come out in this last season, because I have not seen very many live. I think maybe one or two. But the episode I like to talk about, the title of the episode is called Cartman Land, and let me check here. It is the sixth episode in the fifth season, and one thing that I think is very impressive about South Park is that from my perspective, it has not even come close to jumping the shark. The first maybe 3 or 4 seasons are not great. They have good episodes in them. There are some classic episodes in it, but by and large, I think that they're the weakest seasons. And then from then on, it becomes a show that is consistently excellent. There are episodes that aren't as good, peppered in more or less evenly, but the most recent stuff is great. The stuff from 10 years ago is great. The stuff from 15 years ago is great. This is in marked contrast to, say, a show like The Simpsons. The Simpsons, I think, has not been a good show since probably the 6th or 7th season at best. That is a show I think that was fantastic, and it's amazing how long it's been on and impressive in that regard, but for whatever reason, the quality is just not there. And it's also fascinating that Matt and Trey are able to make these shows in 6 days, basically. Sometimes they have a little bit more prep than that because they do work out some of the plots beforehand, but often not. And they can make a show that is better, that is a lot better in terms of the comedic aspect of it and the drama and the resonance of the issues that they deal with than any of these other animated shows. I realize that because of the types of animation, that's one thing. But you think that, okay, a show The Simpsons or Family Guy takes a long time to animate, so they can't do it in 6 days, but then you would think they'd at least make it a lot funnier and a lot more substantive, and they for whatever reason can't. And I think a lot of this just has to be attributed to Matt and Trey. They seem to be one of the greatest creative duos in history, for that matter. So season 5, here is the DVD of it, just to show you. And the episode is titled Cartman Land. And for those of you who aren't familiar with the episode, Cartman is basically a psychopath. In the show, he begins as a brat. The first couple seasons, he's a overweight brat, and he becomes progressively more outlandish in his villainy, to the point where he becomes the most evil being human, ever. I believe I've heard Matt and Trey say that this is a genesis. This is something that happens when he murders the parents of his half-brother, Scott Tenorman. There becomes this, well, I don't want to give it away, but he ends up drinking the tears of someone whose parents he has just murdered, and talking about how much he loves drinking the tears of unfathomable sadness. At that point, he stops being anything close to like a normal child or having normal childlike reactions, which the other characters, although obviously they do many unrealistic things and have unrealistic dialogue and questions, often have what might be considered kind of normal child reactions or normal child thoughts. This is not true with Cartman. Cartman is depicted as basically pure evil. In this episode, Cartman suddenly finds himself the beneficiary of an inheritance of $1 million from an aunt. That he decides to fulfill a lifelong dream of his, which is to own a theme park. He buys a theme park which he intends to use solely for his own benefit. He doesn't want anyone else to ride it. He has no desire for anyone else to derive any benefit from this accumulation of rides and games and whatnot. And of course, included within his benefit, not only does he enjoy the materialistic aspect of the rides, but he also relishes the opportunity this gives him to taunt and berate his friends, especially Kyle the Jew. He doesn't just draw pleasure from riding the rides, he likes to be able to ride them and then flaunt the fact that he can in front of Kyle. Now, what's really fascinating about this is that Cartman has suddenly been placed into the most evil archetypal version of a capitalist that exists within our society, our zeitgeist. Now, of course, our society doesn't always view capitalists as evil no-goods. There is, of course, a large amount of understanding that, you know, in order to have that capital in the first place, they had to have worked hard or whatever. But there's certainly a sentiment of unearned rewards here, and that when we're talking with socialists, this is the only archetype. A capitalist is always somebody who has ill-gotten gains or did not, you know, legitimately earn this, that it's something that simply falls into their lap, and that they are granted through no virtue of their own a position high up in the hierarchy. Now, whether or not that's true in general, this is true in the case of Cartman in this video. He is the arch-capitalist. He did no work to do this. He's an evil person. He has nothing but contempt for other humans. His only profit he sees in other humans is to humiliate them and to belittle them. If they're Jews, to murder them. And he finds himself the owner of this large amount of property. So what's fascinating is that as the episode progresses, Cartman is forced by circumstances, but what libertarians and economists, people who are not economically literate, even people who are not libertarians, would recognize as the market. He develops a problem with Kyle and Stan, his other friend, attempting to break into the amusement park and ride rides. Now, he does not want this to happen because that would not jive with his desire to belittle them and to mock them from his position of, you know, supreme ecstasy. So he basically has to hire a security guard. He finds a security guard and tells him, I would like you to keep Stan and Kyle, everyone, but particularly Stan and Kyle, away from my amusement park. Don't let them in. And the potential security guard says, well, I'd be willing to do that. What are you going to pay me? And Cartman says, I will allow you to ride 2 rides a day. If you come and you ride 2 rides a day, I will permit you I will permit you to ride 2 rides a day if you perform these security functions. Now, in a very nonchalant, non-attempting to win a libertarian argument way, but in a way that is completely believable and plausible. In fact, so believable and plausible that it would make no sense for the conversation to go any other way, the security guard says, no thanks, I don't really want rides. I don't really need a chance to take a ride. What I really need is money. What I really need is money. And I'm not going to stand here and try and keep your friends out just so that I can ride a roller coaster twice a day. I will only do it if you pay me, and if you pay me a certain amount. Because if it's less than that certain amount, I'll just go do something else. I'm not going to starve if you don't give me this job. And Cartman is, of course, like all capitalists, completely retarded and doesn't know what to do, but the potential security guard suggests all you would need to do is have other people that you would allow into the park, charge them a fee, and use that fee to pay my salary. Cartman agrees, and he starts allowing 2 people a day to come into the park, uses that money to pay the security guard to then thwart the attempts of Kyle and Stan to enter the park. And what then starts to happen is that because there are people riding the parks, mostly Cartman, but now these other 2 people, the rides start to break down, they start to require maintenance, and all of a sudden, instead of only allowing 2 people on, it becomes necessary to allow, 10, 20, 30 to try and fix the rides, which of course causes there to be more wear and tear, and next thing you know, Cartman's park is full of people. It's necessary to fill it full of people in order to pay to keep it from collapsing in on itself. And he becomes frustrated, and he basically sells it for nothing, I believe. He also gets in trouble. A little side note: the IRS shows up and says, "How come you haven't been paying taxes on this?" So, even though, I mean, there are actually several layers of libertarian allegory there. I don't think that, again, Matt and Trey were consciously attempting to put libertarian allegory into it, but their ethic is a libertarian one, and it's just being reflected in the narrative that they're telling. So, what's interesting about this is that it kind of destroys, the illustration destroys the myth of the work for a boss or starve, or the idea that an employer has infinite or absolute bargaining power when it comes to his employees. It's simply not true. This is simply not true. Now, it's empirically true because if it was true, then all employees would make either nothing or whatever the government mandated minimum was. Okay, we have minimum wage laws, so why doesn't everybody make minimum wage? If an employer has infinite bargaining power or so vastly more bargaining power than their employees, then they would just go to all their employees and say, government says we have to pay you whatever, $7.25 an hour, that's what we're paying you. We're not paying you anymore. And we have, supposedly this enormous advantage in bargaining power, and so they would be able to do this. And they don't, because it's less than, I think, less than 5%, certainly less than 10% that even make minimum wage. Everyone else makes more than that. And that state of the world cannot be explained by something, by a theory. And I don't care if it's a Marxist theory or some other socialist theory. This is the rhetoric. This is the theoretical justification for so many arguments. I don't care what the genesis of the argument is. It must be false, because that's not what you see in the real world. The only way Cartman can get people to come and service his rides and protect his park is to offer them something, to give them an incentive to do so. If he's only going to stomp on their face like a boot in eternity, like 1984, the way capitalists are kind of depicted in the at least the extreme anti-capitalist view, if not necessarily the more moderate, mixed economy view, then there's no reason for them to come. If you're just gonna like make my life a horrible living hell, why would I even bother working for you at all? So. It's also interesting that even though Cartman is evil, this is an amazing allegory, even though Cartman is evil, I mean literally evil, he is forced by market conditions to basically become a servant of his customers, and ends up creating a very successful, popular theme park. That's what happens at the end of the episode. And it's an illustration that I think, I don't know if socialists who would watch the episode would even catch it, but it's there, and it's not an outlandish. I mean, the scenario is outlandish, but the logic of the security guard and of Cartman and hiring them, and of having to bring in more customers is not outlandish. And it's also an illustration of the fact that you can't just have a pot of gold. You can't just have capital goods just sit there. You have to utilize them, or they will erode through your own consumption. If you don't produce anything, then what you consume is going to eventually dilapidate whatever it is you inherited. And the only way to keep that from happening is to produce something. And to produce it, you have to manage it effectively. You have to provide a good and service that people are willing to pay for, and that what they're willing to pay is in excess of what it costs to run, and that's not easily done. And in the process, of course, you hire people, so you're creating jobs. You're also providing good service. So I think it's a wonderful episode. It's also very funny. There's actually a whole other, the main kind of story, the main kind of moral, and this isn't even about the whole thing. It's about, well, I don't want to get into it because it's not particularly libertarian. There's a whole subplot with Kyle and his suffering or whatever. I guess it's a testament to the richness of the production of the show, that like there's so many layers in it that are there. And I think a lot of socialists would do well to watch this and realize, is this not like, what do you think the security guard would say? Oh, I would be happy to become your slave for nothing. Why? There's no reason for them to behave in that way. They would demand something in return, probably money, although it could also be goods and services. And to say that they demand money doesn't mean that you can then just pay them a penny a day or $1 a day. It means you have to pay them more than they can get at their next best alternative. Unless you're assuming a condition, not only a monopoly on a particular industry, but a monopoly of all employers, then that is not going to be a penny a day or whatever. Yeah, it's a great episode. I highly recommend people watch South Park. I think it's hilarious. Matt and Trey, again, it's not a secret that they're libertarians. They have sort of admitted it a couple times. They've used the term. They've said that they hate liberals and they hate conservatives. And, again, I don't think that there are people who are going to ever go and lecture at the Mises Institute or talk about Austrian economics or anything like that per se, at least unless that stuff becomes topical in the mass media, which is another kind of thing about the show, is that because they make them so recently, they can discuss issues that have happened right away. And so there is actually one kind of, during the Republican debates, actually, the episode wasn't about that, but it began with the Republican debates, and they showed video of Gingrich and all of them, and then it showed Ron Paul, and then they actually just ran Ron Paul's speech for some time in the background for almost a minute and a half, and that probably actually, maybe they were just running the audio, but a lot of people think that they were kind of giving a silence, because they didn't actually lampoon Ron Paul, they lampooned the other Republicans, especially Gingrich. Not Ron Paul, but then they played his audio, which of course is not an accident. They didn't randomly pick something to play there. They obviously picked Ron Paul. So, I don't think that these guys are lacing these surreptitiously to spread libertarian ideas. I think that they have a libertarian moral compass, and their episodes reflect that. And in addition to being hilarious and funny, and they have all kinds of other morals that aren't necessarily libertarian, but yeah, it's a great show, and I just recommend that people watch it. That's episode, what did I say? The title of the show is called Cartman Land, but it's the 6th episode in the 5th season, 71st overall episode. So anyway, hope to do a couple more videos here. I've been off for about a week. I've got about another week, and then I'm going to have to go back. But I've been doing very well, and I'll talk to you all later. Bye-bye.